After adoption service, it probably seems a million miles away that you would have children placed with you and need some sort of after adoption service, really. So this is a bit of a tough gig to keep you interested. I was saying to somebody there, what we look for in adoptive parents is resilience. And the fact that you're still sitting on those benches an hour later shows I think you've all got resilience. So kind of well done, and well done for sort of hanging around. And I'll try and make this as interesting as it possibly can be, given where you are in your journey and given what I've kind of got to talk about, really. Some context to that, I was interested in listening to the adoptive parents' perspective, because I work at Scottish Adoption, but that's kind of not my real job. My background's in engineering. I kind of came into adoption services in 2010. My interest in adoption is I actually have adopted 3 siblings back in 1997. So I have a kind of interest in adoption and ended up sort of working here, which is sort of fun. And I reached a landmark yesterday because my youngest was 20, so I no longer have any teenage children. And I just need them to stop acting like teenagers now, and I'm sorted. But that looks like it's a long way away. Our kind of starting point is sort of looking at after adoption services, and this is all going to seem like it's light years away given where you are in your journey. But what we're finding is that most of our families now, we have an expectation that most people come back for support at some point on their adoption journey. And I think, like most people, where I was where you are, had this romantic notion, then when people were talking about children, they were talking about the children that everybody else would get. They weren't talking about the children I would get. Reality has since set in. My work in adoption services is set in a bit, and the reality is most people need some support some of the time. And that kind of happens at different ages and stages. So all I'm going to do is try and cover the range of services that's available in our agency. It's not exclusive to our agency, other agencies are available, but we'll kind of talk about what we do at Scottish Adoption and how we provide that service. And I don't think I've even got time for questions, but we're kind of out at the end of the hall, so come and grab me afterwards, really. All I've got to do is work out where the arrows on this are to flick through the thing, and we're sorted. There's some recurring themes in adoption work, and these are, when you get on your adoption journey, you start to hear these words quite a lot. And I've kind of just categorised them as attachment, loss, identity, and education. And I'll just kind of take them one at a time, really. Because it was interesting talking to the previous speaker about kind of children's sort of start in life and how that sort of impacts on the people that they become. And attachment is a kind of psychological theory that we won't touch on, but really it impacts on how children make relationships with other human beings. And a lot of the time we're seeing adopters coming back really struggling with making those sort of deep relationships with their children and looking for help in building attachments due to the fact that children never got the opportunity to do this in their formative years. The bit between sort of 6 and 18 months is this time where young children start to make these attachment relationships with special people. Never really had the opportunity to do that through parental chaotic lifestyle most of the time. So you're really looking to do repair work with these children. We use a sort of technique, TheraPlay, if anybody's ever heard of TheraPlay. It's a series of games, I suppose, that are focused very much on sort of building attachment. So we work a lot with adoptive parents to learn these skills and actually start to build these attachment relationships with their children. But this isn't something that kind of happens only in very young children. Our TheraPlay is kind of staged based on where the child is chronologically, but to represent where the child is emotionally as well. So a lot of the work that we do is helping our adoptive parents to build these attachment relationships a lot of the time through play. The other thing is looking at loss. I mean, pretty much every child has experienced loss that needs to be adopted. Even a child who's gone into foster care almost at birth, had a positive experience through foster care, is then left managing the loss that comes along with the severance of that relationship with the foster carer. So children have lost birth families and sometimes lost the only relationship that was keeping them safe in their very short lives. So loss is a sort of a bit of a recurring theme in adoption. So a lot of the time it's working with families where children have experienced loss and helping them to take the child through that journey and almost kind of join up their kind of past the present, then look at how that kind of shapes their future. That idea of helping children have this kind of coherent narrative of their life story ties into identity, and we do a lot of work with identity as well. Some of that's around helping children understand their early experiences in an age-appropriate manner so that they can feel okay about their past, feel okay about the present, and actually make a sort of pathway to the future. And education is the last one I've got on there, and increasingly our sort of work is taking place in schools. Schools, kind of very well intentioned, I find schools fantastic to work with, but sometimes understanding how early trauma impacts on a child's development, sometimes schools need a bit of support with that. A lot of the time what they see is the behaviour, and what they're trying to manage is the behaviour without really understanding that what we're seeing from this child is a perception of threat. We're seeing a classic fight, flight, freeze response, and sometimes that can be interpreted as a behavioural issue. So a lot of work in schools, and I find schools fantastic to work with, and that's where we make the most progress, when we're in with schools in the education system and helping schools just understand where behaviours come from and strategies for managing that. So we are seeing a lot of our work now in terms of supporting our adopters with school meetings, and actually in talking to head teachers and teachers around how a child's early experience may be impacting on the behaviours that they're seeing. That transition to primary school is a difficult time for children as well, so all that stuff is going on. Feelings of kind of a lack of safety, even although they're perfectly safe in school, that perception of threat brings about a series of behaviours. So that's the kind of recurring themes that we see in our work, and it's kind of delivered in a series of different ways. The first thing is individual work. So this is families coming back saying, I have a particular issue, whether that be attachment, loss, identity, or with the education system, and we go and work with that family on a sort of one-to-one basis, either with the adopters themselves or with the adopters and their child, or sometimes direct work with children. So that individual work is a big part of what we do, but also kind of tying that into group work, and I've put a couple of examples up there. Tadpoles is an attachment-based group that we run for small children, so every one of our adopters is invited along to a Tadpoles group. They can opt in or opt out of that if they choose, but every one of our adopters is given the opportunity to come along to a therapy group once their child is in placement to learn some of those therapy techniques which are around building an attachment with their child. We also have a young persons group, and the reason I sort of mention this is a few years ago we had issues with teenagers transitioning to high school. So we were running a sort of transition group for young people who were looking to go to high school and struggling to manage those early high school years. That group then became a group of young people who met on a Friday night and ate pizza and watched movies and never spoke about adoption, but they knew everybody else in the room was. It used to be called the Teenagers Group, then they all got older and we couldn't get rid of them, so we've now named it the Young Persons Group, and they still meet regularly. So that's something that kind of happens. Really, their parents initially came looking for a bit of support, but the young people themselves have kind of taken that on board. And what they've been very good at is younger young people coming into the group. Now the older, more established members of the group kind of help them to talk about things that are related to adoption. So that works really well. And there's a series of group work programs. Again, all our adopters are aware of the group work programs that are running, and they choose to kind of opt in or sort of opt out of that, really. We also do some workshops, which I think these ones are particularly useful, because one of the things that people maybe struggle with is, how do I talk to my child about being adopted, and how do I talk to them about their past experiences and how that impacts on the person that they've become. So one of the workshops that's quite popular is what we call the Talking About Adoption workshop, and that's for adoptive parents in terms of skilling them up to speak to their children about being adopted at different sort of ages and stages. The Wise Up workshop tackles the other end of the equation. That tools up adopted children to actually speak about adoption. So if they're being asked questions by their peers or by teachers at school, that we tool them up then in terms of being able to do that. Wise Up is an acronym. It's kind of walk away and exchange something about your adoption story. So it's about different strategies that children can use when people talk to them about being adopted. And you'd be absolutely amazed at some of the stories we hear from adoptive parents about some of the things that their adoptive children have been asked. It's incredible, but I guess people are just nosy, really. So that kind of focuses very much on the kind of work that we do with adoptive parents and adopted children. That probably seems light years away. The kind of next bit we do, there's a series to give you a flavour of Scottish adoption, because we often talk about the adoption triangle, which is children, then we have adoptive parents, and also we have kind of birth family in there as well. And as an adoption agency, we actually work with everyone that's involved in the adoption triangle. What that sometimes means is we have extra sort of things that go on, facilitating contact. I think in modern day adoption, there's usually some form of ongoing contact with birth family members. The most common way that that's done is through an exchange of letters or information, maybe once or twice a year. So as an agency, we will facilitate that exchange of information between birth family and their children, and also where direct contact, face-to-face contact, was deemed to be in the child's best interest, and that's what happens. Sometimes we facilitate that as well. So it's another bit of work that the agency undertakes, just to give you some kind of sense of the range of work that goes on. We also, fairly new, are developing a therapy centre. So this is where children have very sort of specific needs, maybe sort of dealing with early trauma, and we have a range of sort of methods of dealing with that. After assessment, the most appropriate method is employed. We have a music therapist and an art therapist and an occupational therapist that operate within our therapy centre. So any of the workers who are working with a family and feeling that they do need a sort of specialist input can be referred to either of the therapists that are kind of working within the agency. One of the other things we do is adult counselling, something I'm heavily involved in now. My time at Scottish Adoption has been involved in assessing adopters and making placements. Fairly recently sort of moved into adult counselling. We actually hold all the adoption records for the old Lothian Regional Council, as well as the Church of Scotland and the Scottish Episcopal Church. What that means is someone who is in their 50s and has suddenly found out they're adopted, they'll be pointed towards us because we hold the records. We will find the records, counsel them through the content of the records, and that kind of sometimes leads on to doing a search on their behalf, a birth family that are still surviving. The second bit in there is intermediary work, and that's exactly what we'll do. We'll sit in the middle of the adopted adult and any birth family members that we find, and we'll exchange information, and sometimes that leads to a reunion. I was just telling somebody outside, actually, I have a reunion happening on Saturday where I've got a 81-year-old mother meeting her 52-year-old son, and all they've ever done is exchange emails through me. So that's a kind of very nice bit of work. So our agency undertakes this element of sort of adult counselling as well, because we hold the adoption records. We do get involved in some developmental work, and we've done some development work recently, a programme called Chance for Change, and this was working directly with birth mothers who had lost their children to adoption, and it was identifying the reasons why these children were lost to adoption and what would need to change within the family of birth. So that programme's completed, currently under evaluation, but I guess that just indicates the kind of range of work that we do as an adoption agency in terms of meeting the needs of all the people that are involved in the adoption triangle.